reading from the Bhagavad Gita as it is, chapter 15, which is Yoga the Supreme. This is text number 8. That's 15:8. Shriram yadavapnoti yatschapyukramiti shraha grihi vaitani samyati vayor ganda ivashayat. The living entity in the material world carries his different conceptions of life from one body to another as the air carries aromas. Thus he takes one kind of body and again quits it to take another. Please repeat. The living entity in the material world carries his different conceptions of life from one body to another as the air carries aromas. Thus he takes one kind of body and again quits it to take another. This is the purport by our spiritual teacher, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Here the living entity is described as Ishvara, the controller of his own body. If he likes, he can change his body to a higher grade, and if he likes, he can move to a lower class. Minute independence is there. The change his body undergoes depends upon him. At the time of death, the consciousness he has created will carry him on to the next type of body. If he has made his consciousness like that of a cat or a dog, he's sure to change to a cat's or dog's body. And if he has fixed his consciousness on godly qualities, he will change into the form of a demigod. And if he is in Krishna consciousness, he'll be transferred to Krishna Loka in the spiritual world and will associate with Krishna. It is a false claim that after the annihilation of this body, everything is finished. The individual soul is transmigrating from one body to another, and his present body and present activities are the background of his next body. One gets a different body according to karma, and he has to quit this body in due course. It is stated here that the subtle body which carries the conception of the next body develops another body in the next life. This process of transmigrating from one body to another and struggling while in the body is called karshati, or a struggle for existence. So the text again. Shriram yadavapnoti yatschapyukramiti shraha grihi vaitani samyati vayor ganda iva shayat. The living entity in the material world carries its different conceptions of life from one body to another as the air carries aromas. Thus he takes one kind of body and again quits it to take another. Namah Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Tanamane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Bhaktivyade Satarane. Our spiritual teacher would sometimes tell us that at these big universities there is so much information about what's outside in the universe, underneath the earth, but there's no information what's inside ourselves. Because they have psychology. As a matter of fact, I studied psychology at the University of Buffalo, and there the psychology I studied was called experimental psychology. And that experimental psychology was about behavior modification. And it more or less, the topic was, the main point was that we're not different from the rats or the dogs, actually. The dogs that in Pavlov's experiment were just, all our activities are all due to our conditioning, and we react to the conditioning called reflexes. They took dogs and they gave them some food to eat, and then they rang a bell. Actually, they had the dog, they rang a bell, and then they gave it some food to eat. So the dog would produce saliva, and he heard the bell. So then they didn't give him any food, they just rang the bell, and the dog would produce saliva. So the conclusion was that we're all just acting according to whatever our environment is. We're just reacting to it. In other words, we have no intelligence. Now, Bhagavad Gita, as Prabhupada said, he came to the West to give people a brain. Because they accuse the Hare Krishna movement of brainwashing people. But Prabhupada said that that was not possible because people in the West didn't have any brains. So it'd be hard to brainwash something. And he said if they had any brains, they were made out of cow dung, and the more you washed them, it didn't really make any difference. But Prabhupada came to give us some intelligence, and that intelligence is not the intelligence that he created, it's reality. In other words, what's factually going on here in this universe. It's not that he made anything up, but he just revealed what's actually going on. And here it says that we have different conceptions of life. Now, I think everyone will agree with that, because if you get 5 people together, you'll get 6 opinions on everything. So everyone has a different idea of what's going on. But Bhagavad Gita is, I can claim, is the one book that actually is scientific. Scientific means that it's equally true in the present. It was equally true millions of years ago, and it will be equally true 5 million years from now. In other words, Bhagavad Gita actually explains reality. Reality doesn't change. Just to give an example, that 5 million years ago, people are eating, they were sleeping, they were mating, and they're defending. And as far as I know, throughout the whole universe, today, at this very moment, people are eating, sleeping, mating, defending. And since I studied astrology for many years, I can predict that in 5 million years from now, people will be eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. So actually, there's no past, present, or future. We're just changing. The only thing that's changing is slightly the clothes that we wear when we eat, sleep, mate, and defend. Otherwise, there's nothing real difference. Now in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna begins with explaining that we're not the body. Now, he explains it very simply, that our bodies are changing, and I think, as we all heard before, most of us, all of us can admit that our bodies are changing. It shouldn't be a debate going on. At least those who have some knowledge can admit, however reluctantly, that our bodies are changing and that we're not getting younger. But we ourselves, who can remember what bodies we've had in the past, we're still here. So what we're remembering has disappeared, but we've survived the disappearance of what we're remembering. So we must be eternal. The problem is we're in a place where we're eternally in ignorance. Because although with our intelligence, whatever intelligence we have, we can perceive our eternality, but we don't experience it. In other words, we still somehow or another misidentify ourselves with this gross and subtle body, and therefore we're in anxiety. What's going to happen to us in the future? Because we think we're this body. Although we know we're not the body, but still we identify ourselves with it. And not only that, but we're so tightly connected to the body, as I've said many times, that we actually think that the goal of life is to serve my body until the very end, when our body finally gets sick of us and throws us out. Therefore, although we're very faithful servants of this body, and our minds, of course, which goes along with the body, but actually it's a misdirection of the soul, because we ourselves as souls are not supposed to serve temporary bodies. We're supposed to serve someone who's eternal also. in all the movies, or at least previously, I haven't watched so many movies lately, so I don't really know. But previously, all the love affairs went on supposedly forever. The hero would take Snow White somewhere forever. They lived happily ever after. There was one commercial I saw that devotees posted. It was for water, of all things. And there in the commercial for water, a cowboy's riding his horse, and he hears the cries of a damsel, help, help. And he goes out to the edge of a mountain, and he sees the damsel is hanging on to a tree, crying out for help. So the cowboy gets the lasso, throws the lasso, who's going to throw the lasso at the lady to help her, to save her. But then he takes a sip of this water, and suddenly he gets this illumination. He sees that in the future he's married to her, and she has curlers in her hair, and he's feeding the baby. And his mother-in-law comes in and he starts thinking about what's going to happen. So he takes the lasso back, the rope back on the horse, and rides away. So we like to think that everyone's going to live happily ever after, but no one lives ever after, and certainly they don't live happily ever after. So this is our dream, this is our hope, because that's our natural position. We're supposed to live happily ever after. This is our natural experience of existence, but we're covered by illusion, therefore we're trying to find that happiness ever after in the wrong place, that's all. So Bhagavad Gita gives us a hint where we can find it, and it's not that far away. It's inside ourselves. It's ourselves. It's our real selves. Therefore, it's a question of not simply doing exercises, which are not bad. Prabhupada didn't mind us doing exercises, our spiritual teacher. We have to maintain this body nicely, because this body is a vehicle, and to get anywhere you need a vehicle. So you have to maintain it. But we should know where we're supposed to go with this vehicle. Now, as I've said, we wake up in the morning and we ask the mirror, when we look in the mirror, mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the greatest of them all? And it just so happens that, generally speaking, we all get the same answer, that you're looking at the most worshipful deity in the mirror. So please render unalloyed devotion to that deity that you see. And so we become very enthusiastic. We think, now I've understood the goal of my life. And we decide, if we're a little pious, we're going to take a shower. That's called abhishek. Then we clothe the deity, we decorate the deity. We do everything to make the deity presentable to our devotees so they can worship our deity properly like we do. And then we feed the deity, and then we go out into the world to spread the glories of our deity everywhere. It's called Sankirtan. But actually, we are deity worshippers. Everyone is a deity worshipper. But the difference is that most people are worshiping a dead deity called an idol, and we're worshiping a real deity, a living deity called the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now, as I was saying in most of my lectures here, now we have a choice. We can accept that there's a Supreme Person, or we can deny his existence. We can say that I have no experience, I have no reason to believe in a Supreme Person, but actually, first of all, Krishna at least is explaining in the Bhagavad Gita something that which it should be obvious, but is really not even talked about. Even in the best universities in the world, there's no education about the soul. They think the soul is the mind, or they think it's an imagination. but it's the only reality that it's the reality that we're very close to, our own eternality. Between a microphone, and my microphone is dead. And now it's supposedly live, but I can assure you my microphone is still dead. Or else we'd have the microphone give the class. That if we can't see the difference between the floor we're sitting on and the people who are sitting on the floor, the fact that in their bodies is a soul that makes them conscious, that if I kick the floor, no one will probably complain, except I'll probably hurt my foot. But if I kick someone else here, there probably might be a few complaints, because inside the body is a soul who's conscious of the body, will feel the effect of our activities. And yet the body actually doesn't feel the effect of the activities. Just like a puppet. You have a puppet, and inside the puppet is a hand, because unless there was a hand inside the puppet, it wouldn't move. And all the children are watching the puppet show, thinking how nice the puppet is. But someone takes the hand out of the puppet, and the puppet falls on the ground, and all the children stand around the puppet trying to revive it, giving it artificial respiration. And someone finally declares that the puppet's dead. And all the children start crying. They get a box, put the puppet in the box, and take it to puppet graveyard. But actually the puppet is not dead, because something that's already dead can't die. Since the puppet was never alive, it can't die. And whoever put his hand in the puppet didn't die when he put his hand outside the puppet. It just became obvious that the puppet was never alive, because when the life was withdrawn from it, now we understand it's dead. It's not alive, because it was never alive. Similarly, our body is never alive. It just appears alive because we're inside of it. But as soon as we leave it, then we can actually see there's no living, it's dead. But somehow or another, we're identifying ourselves, which is called illusion, with this gross and subtle body, thinking that when I leave the body, then I die. But actually I don't die, nor does the body die, because it's already dead. Now, to understand that requires some intelligence, and to gain that intelligence, this is what Krishna is giving us in the Bhagavad Gita, trying to tell us how we can gradually remove our misconceptions of life. And the main one is that we think that we're the supreme here. Actually, we don't know who we are. We think this body is supreme, and we identify ourselves with the body, and by identification, we think we become supreme. We think we become something special because we think our body's special. You may have a puppet in the form of a king or a queen, and now we think all the children think there's the king or the queen. But actually, the hand hasn't become a queen or a king. The hand is exactly the same. There's no real advancement by putting different puppets on our hand. So as we enter into different bodies, we don't change. We'll still be remaining the same, but because we identify ourselves with these bodies by misidentification, we think we're either becoming advanced or we're becoming degraded. Either we're becoming prominent and powerful, or we're becoming insignificant. But actually, the fact is, the only real advancement is our realization that we're eternal. If we just realize we're eternal, then there's no more problems, because we have no problems. The only problem is we think we have problems. And the very thing that we think is so important in our life, this body, our identification with the body, whether it advances or something, we gain something or we lose something, but actually the only thing we're doing, either gaining or losing, is misidentifying ourselves with something that we're not. So the real advancement is to identify ourselves as something that we actually are. Now, one thing we can understand is that we're not in control of this universe. Sorry to tell you. It doesn't matter who we think we are. No one here is in control. Even in some places, people think they figured it out. It's the Illuminati who's in control. But I can tell you the Illuminati is not in control either. Because even the most powerful person in history that we know of, Hiranyakashipu, who was able to stand on the tip of his toes, yogis would be envious of such a person. He was on the tip of his toes for 120 years of the demigods. And he was going through talking about fasting. He fasted for he didn't eat anything. He didn't drink anything. He simply stood there, and after some time, the ants, the moths, came and ate his body, up to the bones. They even ate his brains. And some people say that if he had any brains, he wouldn't have kept standing there. So obviously, he lost his brains. In any case, he was standing there for 120 years of the demigods in order to get some benedictions from the ruler of the universe, named Brahma. And because of austerities, he was causing such a disturbance in the universe that Lord Brahma came to end his austerities and offered him a benediction. And his benediction was, he wanted to live forever. I remember reading when I was 10 years old, we had what were called comic books, which were not very funny. I don't know why they called them comic books. In any case, in the comic book, it promised that in 25 years, that the scientists would discover a pill, so we take the pill, we live forever. And I can assure you that the scientists whoever wrote that article, along with the scientists who promised it, they've already left their bodies. So everyone is hoping that they're going to stay here forever and keep everything they're working so hard for. But actually, Hiranyakashipu, after his inconceivable austerity, and he asked Lord Brahma, who lives for 311 trillion 40 billion of our years, Hiranyakashipu asked him, I want to become immortal. But Lord Brahma said, I'm sorry. He said, if I'd give you the benediction of immortality, but I have to die myself. So if I had that benediction, I'd give it to myself first before I gave it to you. So Hiranyakashipu was very disappointed, but he thought he could work around it, and he asked for 100 benedictions from Lord Brahma, that he wouldn't die inside or outside. He wouldn't die in the day or the night by any animal or beast or man. He wouldn't die in so many different ways. He tried to work around and get a benediction that he'd stay here forever. So Lord Brahma gave him 100 benedictions. But finally, Lord Nrsimhadev appeared, and Hiranyakashipu developed a very acute problem in his stomach, and he died. So even Hiranyakashipu, after so much austerity, couldn't surpass time in the form of Lord Nrsimhadev. And similarly, no one here is surpassing time. We're all just fooling ourselves. It's just we're being misled and lied to by so-called leaders of society. Because it's impossible. Time is changing everything. Krishna says, Kalasmi Bharatar, I am time, Kalasmi Bharatarshva. Time is changing everything, and no one has any influence whatsoever on time. They have these, I saw this series they were trying to sell me on the internet. I almost bought it, but I didn't. Because they wanted to charge money. It said it's free. So, well, free, okay. It's worth the price. But it was promising longevity. Teaching you how to look like you're 30 when you're 90. They call that longevity. How to pretend that you're something that you're not. In any case, it's impossible to live 1 second past what our allotted time, because time is in control of everything here. Time is changing everything throughout the whole universe. What to speak of our little tiny body. We can't even, if there's such a thing as an atom with electrons circulating around it, and inside there's a nucleus with protons and neutrons, we can't even change the orbit of even one electron in our body. What to speak of anything else? The scientists, they keep on telling us that they know they're controlling things, that they figure out what's inside the atom. They hit it with something, and they say out comes quarks. But that's all foolishness. Just like if you have a dog, you hit the dog, and out comes woofs. Does that mean that a dog is made out of woofs? They don't really know what's going on, nor can, even if they could change the atom, whatever, figure out what's inside the atom, still they can't change the atom from changing. The only thing they do, they claim they can create an atomic bomb and destroy things. That they're good at. Everyone's going to die anyhow. We don't need the scientists to tell us, to figure out how to kill us quicker. If they just wait, if they have a little patience, they can just wait, and we're going to leave this world anyhow, with or without them. So they claim there's no God, there's no reason to bow down, but ultimately at the time of death, everyone has to bow down, and unfortunately, everyone has to die, or maybe fortunately. When Srila Prabhupada was in England, the reporters were asking Srila Prabhupada, telling Prabhupada that we hear that you're from England and that you're from India. You're from India. And we heard that in India there are many people who are sick there and many people are dying. So Prabhupada said, yes, it's a fact. I've been in India. I have experience. There are many people who become sick there and even people die there. But I've been in England for so long, and now I've noticed that people get sick here also. And I've noticed that people even in England, the most advanced country, scientific country in the world, people die here. As a matter of fact, unfortunately in India, the death rate is 100%. And from what I understand here in England, the death rate is also 100%. So what is the advancement? What are you so proud about your scientific advancement? You can't keep anyone from dying or getting sick or becoming old. What can you do? They can't really do very much. They can have fancy cars and fancy roads so that if you get into an accident, leave your body on the road, then you die. Just like, I'll give you an example. My aunt had a bladder infection. So my uncles, my relatives were very much believing in science. So they took my aunt to the hospital and they diagnosed that she had a bladder infection. This is a true story, but I'm just not making this up. So they diagnosed she had a bladder infection. So they gave her some antibiotics and she had a reaction to it. So then they had to call in specialist doctors and they examined her and they gave her more medicine. And it kept on progressing. More and more medicine, more and more reactions, etc., etc. And finally she left the body. She could have fasted for a few days and gotten cured, but that's not very scientific. So my uncle, finally he got the bill. It was $1,200,000. And he was quite happy that his wife had gotten the best scientific treatment. luckily, Medicare paid for $1 million and he had to pay $200,000, so he thought he had gotten a deal. But actually, the point is, this whole idea that somehow or another we can stop this body from dying or changing, whatever else, is ridiculous. And all this so-called science that's telling us how we're going to, keep ourselves alive by replacing the liver, by replacing the heart, by replacing the lungs, by replacing our brains. That everything will be plastic, and finally they'll figure out what our code is, and they'll digitalize us, store us away, and when someone wants to speak to us, they'll bring us back into memory. It's all imagination, it's all a lie, and people are becoming misled instead of actually utilizing this opportunity to take shelter of the person who's controlling everything, and the person who's controlling time, who's moving the planets in their orbits exactly on time, who's the biggest scientist, because after all, if the scientists could actually do what he's doing, we'd give them some more credit than they deserve. Of course, we give them credit. They can create computers, they can create spaceships, they can create so many things, but they can't stop death, they can't stop old age, they can't stop disease, and they can't stop us from taking birth again in some species of life. But there is a scientist who's much more powerful than any of these scientists. For instance, if a scientist can create a male machine and a female machine, wouldn't that be amazing? And when they get together, they make little machines. So if a scientist could create a male Rolls Royce and a female Rolls Royce, and when they get together, they make little Rolls Royces. And you feed it gasoline and a little oil, you wash it once a week or something. And then it grows up, it becomes a big Rolls Royce. Everyone could get a Rolls Royce, very cheap. There'd be millions of Rolls Royces. But the scientists can't create such a machine. But Krishna has created that machine. And 8,400,000 species of life. That if the scientists could create a machine, you put in grass at one end, and at the other end comes milk. Wouldn't that be a nice machine? Everyone wouldn't mind mowing their lawn. It would be productive. You mow your lawn on the weekends, and you put the grass in the machine, and then you can get your own ice cream from your lawn. Then you'd like to see the grass growing. But they can't do that. But Krishna has created such a machine, and everyone knows what the machine is. What's the machine called? The what? The cow, yes. The cow. But who's giving the cow the Nobel Prize for Science? Although these things are all around us, although we can see so many amazing things going on, the sun's rising at its appointed time, the sun's setting at its appointed time, we're eating food, it's being digested, the unwanted parts of the valuable parts are being assimilated, the unnecessary parts are being eliminated. So many things are going on, amazingly going on, and we're just unaware of them. We think that, the most amazing thing is the Leaning Tower of Pizza or something. But actually the most amazing things are going on all the time. The fact that we're all eternal and that all of us were imagining that we're temporary and that we're going to have to leave this body, and we're making so many arrangements to try to maintain the body while we're here, and no arrangement to find out who we actually are. That's amazing. The amazing thing is that although at every moment everyone is dying, but the amazing thing is that those who remain think that they're going to live here forever. So that's amazing. Ahani bhutani gachanti amalayam sheshastava ichanti kimastarim atakparam. That's amazing. We're making so many plans for the future, so many big buildings we're building in order to proclaim our supremacy in this universe. I was just riding, I live in Slovenia most of the time, and probably the small little buildings on the highway here are the biggest buildings in Slovenia. And here you have these huge buildings, you're probably 50, 60 floors high, and they all have the name of someone on it, proclaiming their dominance over the skyscraper. And there's so many of them. And they'll be there for some time, the buildings, probably at last the person whose name is on there. And who knows where the person whose name on there is going. As I said before, in France, every year they have a festival which celebrates Napoleon. And of course, what they have to, there's a big statue of France in Paris, and every year they have to come and scrape all the offerings of the birds from his head. And then they have a big festival, and they declare about how wonderful Napoleon was, and then garland Napoleon, and et cetera, et cetera. And then after it's all done, they leave, and the birds come back and make their offering. So Prabhupada said, oh, they're making so many offerings to Napoleon, but where's Napoleon? For all we know, he may be one of the birds coming to make the offering. So what is the value of such an existence? One moment, as Prabhupada was told by an astrologer, that Prime Minister Nehru, he had left his body, and he had become one of 2 dogs in Sweden. I mean, it's bad enough you have to become a dog, but you have to share your dog bowl with another dog. And who knows where the other dog came from. Therefore, Bhagavad Gita is a science to teach us how to wake up and understand what's actually valuable about this human form of life and how to utilize it so that we don't become misled by false conceptions of life, false promises, that somehow or another we can make America or anywhere else in this world anything different from what it actually is, a place of old age, disease, and death. Doesn't matter how high the stock market goes, what the price of gold is, doesn't matter how many vitamin pills we take or what yoga posture we can get into. It won't make any difference. The only difference will be where our consciousness as is at the time of leaving this body. That will determine the difference where we're going. And if we don't make our consciousness, we don't try to make a higher ourselves, come to a higher state of understanding reality, what our relationship with the Supreme Person is who's controlling this universe, we don't advance in that way, then we're just wasting our human form of life. And how much we make advancement any other way. And therefore in this age, all this philosophy, people don't usually like philosophy very much, especially if it's not Freud philosophy or whoever else's philosophy. That they like. But anyhow, even if we don't understand anything of what I said, still, if we chant this simply mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, then more and more we'll get insight of what I'm talking about. And if we have time, we can read these books, such as Bhagavad Gita, the Song of Krishna, the Song of God, and this will explain things scientifically, and we can judge ourselves. We don't have to blindly accept it. We shouldn't blindly reject it. We can find out for ourselves if Krishna is actually the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Everything he said should be perfect, and we can examine the Bhagavad Gita and see if it's perfect or not. And if it's perfect, then we should follow it, because it's the only perfect thing to follow. So I'll stop there. Thank you. Any questions? Yes.
Wait, one second.
Yeah, I had 2 questions, if that's all right. So the first question was like, you mentioned the body is dead to begin with. Similarly, like I know, like at the time of death, the soul and the subtle body leave the material body.
Right.
The material, then you also have like the subtle body, which is like mind, intelligence, and false ego, and that eventually goes back to the universe's outer edge just before you eventually go into the spiritual world. Can you also say that our mind, intelligence, and false ego is dead to begin with as well, because that's not consciousness?
Well, we
and the
have
subtle matter?
the soul. The soul has a body.
Right.
The example is given just like a glove. The glove fits the shape of the hand. The hand isn't made to fit the shape of the glove. So the body is made on the basis of the existence of the soul. So similarly, the subtle body of the soul, the soul also has a mind, intelligence, and ego. So there's a subtle body which is made in relationship to the mind, intelligence, and the ego of the soul. So at the time of leaving this body, we may take our present subtle body with us, but eventually when we can also leave when the subtle body becomes purified, then it no longer affects the soul anymore. Then the soul is pure, mind, intelligence, and ego becomes manifested, and he no longer needs the subtle material body. He's no longer conditioned by it. Just like glasses. Glasses are supposed to help us see better, but if you paint the glasses, say pink, and everywhere you look, everything looks pink, but everything is not pink, you're just seeing through the glasses. But when you take the coloring, the tint off the glasses, then you actually see things as they really are. So the mind, intelligence, and false ego, when they're tinted, especially the mind and intelligence, when they're tinted by the material nature, then we don't see things properly. But when the mind and intelligence becomes purified by the process of yoga, bhakti yoga, then we can actually see things as they actually are again.
I just wanted to comment on that. Yeah, that's takes a little bit of, it's harder to, I guess, process that. It's much easier to process that you're not the body, that's a costume, but the mind, intelligence, and ego is also a second, like, inner costume as well. But my other question was, I might have misheard you. Did you say that Hiranyakasipu died of a stomach ache, or?
Yeah, he really got a...
I guess since everybody's laughing, that was like, probably said it as a joke. Okay. Okay. Oh.
Well, Lord Nrsingadev came, and he tried, in order to, because, part of his pastime, he took his nails and sunk them into the chest of Hiranyakashipu. That was quite painful for him. We could say it affected his whole body, including his stomach. Anything else?
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you
Yeah.
so much for your class. I was asked to give this class a couple of weeks ago, Bhagavatam class, very humble. But at the end, one of the points I made was that Walt Disney has tried to preserve his body so that in time, in the future, he can get life back again. And Jaigaranga Prabhu was traveling. He goes to distribute, bring the prasadam up to UTD, right? And he heard the class, and he sent this thing to me. It's called the Brain Maze, and it says that over 300 people are frozen in cryo chambers awaiting future revival in that body. Is that like kind of bizarre?
Yeah,
Right.
this whole place is bizarre.
Yes.
So many... I mean, if you go to Russia, to Lenin's tomb, they still have him there, trying to preserve. I mean, if you can dig up mummies from thousands of years ago, but they're still mummies. nothing. No one, the only time in history anyone has been revived from the dead was Frankenstein. So if you believe in that, anyhow, if you believe in that, then that's the only time in history, recorded history. Anything else? Yes.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you so much for your class. I was just wondering, as you were speaking how you were a student of the sciences, you were studying psychology, and then very shortly after that you found your spiritual master Srila Prabhupada and you joined the movement. And I was just wondering, what was it in your studies that you were thinking, there's got to be more than this. This doesn't have the answers I'm seeking. How did you go from a science student to a spiritual scientist?
Well, I was actually a student while I was a devotee. I went for a year and a half as a student. A year, actually. I attended classes. My junior year, I guess it was my junior year, maybe part of my sophomore year, I was going with a shaven head and dhoti on. But I was just walking along one day when I was at the university. I was living outside the university. After my freshman year, I was living in an apartment. And I was walking along one day, my whole world changed. Without any drugs, by the way, which is quite common there. But actually, so my whole world changed. I was just walking along, and I saw all the buildings suddenly became like pastels, and I was like living in a fairy tale. I walked to the park, and I realized that I saw all the rocks in the park, and I saw all the flowers, and I realized everything was unlimited. So then I realized that it came to me that the purpose of life is self-realization. I should find out who I actually am, because I had never, this change of consciousness, no one ever told me about. So I realized that must be the aim of life, is to change your consciousness. So then that very week, my sister had her wedding. I went to the wedding, but that was quite surprising to her. Anyhow, I went to the wedding. I went through some ceremony. And I came back, that very week I became a vegetarian. Actually, I was only eating fruit, bananas, and buffalo, because I didn't know how to cook what they had there. And I started to do yoga 6 to 7 hours a day. I started to read every book on the Bible and Eastern books, everything, trying to figure out what the purpose of life was. I still go into class, and this is in May, so I guess it was the end of the semester. So one day, I was going through all these experiences, et cetera, et cetera. So one day I met my friend. His name was Jeffrey Hickey. Later on became Jagadish Maharaj. And he told me about the center they opened in Buffalo. So I went down there, and I found out about I thought it was a Buddhist place because I didn't know Hare Krishna. So I went there, and they told my friends, actually, before I went there in the very beginning of '68, my friends taught me the Hare Krishna mantra, but I didn't know what it was. They were living at 26 2nd Avenue. And I asked them, what do you do what were you doing there? So they said, we wake up around 5 o'clock in the morning, we raise our arms and we dance. So I thought they had become moon worshippers. I had no idea what they were doing. So at this time, my friend told me about the temples. I went down there and I started to chant Hare Krishna. And at that time, because I was doing yoga like 8 hours a day, besides going to school, I had a job as a model. I was getting paid for doing poses in an art studio, for doing hatha yoga poses. So I thought this is the process of self-realization. But one day I was chanting Hare Krishna with my roommate, who also joined. And I got on the bus, and everyone became very friendly on the bus when I was chanting. And then I went to my friend's house, and I was chanting, and his father and his sister were fighting with each other. When I started to chant, they became very peaceful. So I thought, well, I better keep on chanting, and the only place to chant that I would be able to chant consistently would be in the temple. So I moved into the temple, because I realized I had to take shelter of the holy name. And here I am still, trying to take shelter of the holy name. Hare Krishna. All right, thank you very much. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaur Prahladananda.
His Holiness Prahladananda Maharaj ki jai. Thank you so much, Maharaj, for the very nice class. We're very fortunate to have Maharaj here in Dallas. He's been practicing Krishna consciousness since 1969. He's a very senior disciple of Srila Prabhupada and initiating spiritual master in our society. Thank you so much, Maharaj, for coming to Dallas and giving us